Very shortly, the Jewish people will be observing the 9th of Av, Tisha B'Av, coming up in the first week of August. It's a day, the saddest day of the Jewish calendar, when Jews historically commemorate the destruction of the first temple on the 9th of Av in the year 586 by the Babylonians, today's Iraq, and in the year 70, after it was rebuilt by the Romans in the year 70 on the 9th of Av. We sit on the floor, we read the biblical book of Lamentations, Echa, and we mournfully decry the sad city of the fallen Jerusalem. Well, let's pray that never happens again. The world seems to be conspiring to try and achieve it again. You know, there are ancient caliphates in the Muslim world. You have Iran, which today is openly, in fact today, when I'm recording this, the Iran mullah called for the destruction of Israel. You have the ancient Turkish caliphate, and today the dictator of Turkey, which used to be a NATO ally and a friend of the United States, and still seems to be a friend of the United States, said that what Israel is doing in Gaza is worse than Hitler. You have the ISIS, which wants to claim a caliphate, which came about because the United States withdrew from Iraq after Iraq was stabilized, and now controls a lot of Iraq. They're on the border of the Golan with Syria. They're in Gaza. They're in Indonesia. And they say, next we'll see you in Jerusalem, Rome, and New York. The only other Muslim caliphate was Egypt. And today, no thanks to Obama, Egypt is on the side of Israel against Hamas. But God forbid Obama had gotten his way and Muslim Brotherhood Morsi was still in power. And Obama gave him all kinds of sophisticated weapons and over $1 billion in aid. But thank God the Egyptians threw him out, and they're in control by a fairly pro-Western military government. But we have all of these Muslim former caliphates aspiring to caliphate status again, and one of the common values is the killing of all Jews and the destruction of Israel. Hamas's charter calls for the destruction of Israel and the death of Jews. That is what we are dealing with, and it's really time for people to wake up and see exactly what is happening. And so as we think about all this, we think about Iran, and the United States is negotiating with them, thinking that somehow Iran is not making a joke out of us and that we can somehow stop them from their desire to have a nuclear weapon, which is ridiculous, by talking to them. We are doing nothing to stop ISIS in their march as they take over more and more territory and behead their own citizens, let alone what they do to Jews. We're doing nothing to condemn Turkey. Now, thank God the United States was the only country to veto the United Nations resolution, which wanted to try Israel for war crimes. It's the biggest joke in the world when the war crimes are being committed every minute by Hamas, and they're bombing indiscriminate targets in Israel. They're using civilian shields. They're training their kindergartners to hate Jews. They're building tunnels. They're wearing IDF uniforms to try and kill more Jews. This is what is going on today. And so as we think about the 9th of Av, we think about the mourning of the ancient temples and the displacement of Jews from the ancient Palestine, modern-day Israel, although Jews never left completely. Tisha B'Av takes on a really significant additional meaning this year for us as we mourn the loss of lives. The lives are all on Hamas, that are the civilians. Israel agreed to a ceasefire, Hamas rejected it, and they're purposely trying to exacerbate civilian casualties by forcing civilian shields, by ordering people to stay in buildings when Israel says leave because we're going to destroy that building that was housing missiles. Hamas is hiding their missiles in schools, mosques, hospitals. They're transporting their missiles in ambulances with children. That is what is going on. And so as we sit on the floor in that Monday night in August, as we think about the destruction of the temples, we remember Tisha B'Av, we remember what's going on in the world today, how all we can hear from the President of the United States and the Secretary of State is Israel has to show more restraint. Kerry shows up uninvited in the Middle East when clearly Israel and Egypt don't want Israel to stop doing what it's doing to try and decimate Hamas. This is the canary in the coal mine. This is Israel fighting for all of the West in its desire to have peace. Israel's charter calls for living in peace with its neighbors. Hamas's charter calls for the destruction of Israel and the death of Jews. And still, this is the world we live in, where the United Nations wants to prosecute Israel and not Hamas. So understanding that very clearly, it's time to wake up and see what is happening, to throw our full support behind the IDF and their efforts to eradicate this Hamas scourge, and to realize that we're facing the efforts, 1,000-year-old efforts, to reestablish these radical Muslim caliphates which want to destroy the West. They're not your friend. Now, we're not talking about all Arabs and all Muslims, but the leaders of these countries and a significant number of jihadists living in the world today that want to cause great harm to Western civilization. So wake up, and as we sit on the floor and mourn the destroyed temples of Jerusalem, remember these vital lessons. Thank God we have the difference between the destruction of the first and second temple, and today's we have a strong military and a wonderful country, one of the great countries in all of the world, doing things every day to help humanity. And the world is so upside down, it doesn't understand this, said it wants to eradicate Israel. It uses Israel as a whipping boy to blame all of its horrible deficiencies on somebody else, kind of classic scapegoating. And this is the lesson we have to draw, even as we thank God for the existence of the Jewish state, this remarkable, wonderful country.